Alrighty, so thanks everybody for joining us. Before we get started, I wanted to just give a special thank you to everybody who is here today and to our guests. We've got a few friends from cars.co.za, and we really appreciate having you guys here, even if it's virtually. It's a really cool thing to learn and to grow together with you. I'm not joking when I say today's one for the popcorn. Like, it was really, really good when we did our dry run. So just from an organizational perspective, please mute your mic if you're not speaking at the same time, just so that we don't have an echo and just for sound recording purposes. If you've got a question, please pop them inside of the chat section and we'll respond as best we can. And then what we're going to do as well is we're going to kick off. I'm going to help presenting on Peter's side. So if you guys can't see, let me know. We're going to do this as best we can from a remote space. So bear with us if there's a technical brick gremlin or two. And then, Bill, did you have a question? I see you popped up.
I pressed the wrong button. You know, when you're trying to switch between conversation and participants, there's that lovely request control button that sticks in underneath.
Oh, no, it's cool. We like you. It's fine. Alrighty. So let's get cracking. And then I'm going to hand over to Peter and going to just give you guys a sneak peek of the awesome presentation he's put together for us. So just before we do that, just want to make sure everybody can see the screen. Alrighty. Everybody good?
Yes. Thanks, Anine. Hello, everyone. The reason Anine is helping me is because I had to move to a different location to do this because of load shedding. So I don't have a second screen here. I thought I did, but it's only for Max and I have a PC. So we're going to try and be as smooth as possible, but bear with us and have some empathy. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be talking to you guys today about, and how it's actually the secret skill that can help you get ahead by developing deeper relationships. I know you're rolling your eyes now because why do you need to develop relationships at work? Why can't we all just get our jobs done? But you can get your job done. But applying some very simple skills, you can help to build a team that gets its job done better through empathy. Next slide, please, Anine. So we need to define what is the difference between sympathy and empathy. Empathy is a term that we use for the ability to understand other people's feelings as if we were having them ourselves. It can mean projecting our own feeling onto a work of art, onto another object, and it's also what allows us to relate to a video game character or to actors in a movie, whereas sympathy refers to the ability to take part in someone else's feelings, mostly by feeling sorrow for their misfortune. It can also be used in relation to opinions and taste, like when you say you have sympathy for a political cause. Sympathy and compassion are essentially the same thing. So empathy is understanding, but not necessarily sharing or taking part in another person's feelings. Next slide, please. So why does it matter? It matters because we work with other people. Even if you'd like to think that you're an unthinking, unfeeling coding machine, in today's collaborative and agile way of working, you are going to be working with humans, and humans have feelings. Everyone wants to feel to be like they're a part of something, whether that's a team, a tribe, or even a political party. So whether you like it or not, you're going to have to develop deeper relationships with your team and co-workers, your team leads, your managers, and your clients. Some of these are deeper than others, specifically the relationships within a team. And if you display empathy, you develop deeper relationships which lead to trust, and trust then leads to increased performance and delivery. When a team has trust, good things just happen. I'm not going to go into too much detail there. If you want to check that out, there's a whole book on it, The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey. Good reading. And that's where I'd recommend you start if you want to learn more about that. This is about empathy. So next slide, please, Anine. How do you show empathy at work? The simplest way is to listen. If you pay real attention to what someone's saying, you're displaying empathy. Obviously, the actions that you take after listening to them is what cements that feeling, because too often people listen to reply rather than listening to understand. This is especially important for leaders. You've often got the answer and can shortcut a question, but sometimes it's best to hear someone out rather than to always be there with an immediate fix. Sometimes the person will talk through their own solution and come to it and learn something rather than you coming there with a band-aid immediately. You want to allow people the space to grow and find their own problems, but you also need to display empathetic leadership, and this will then build a culture of trust in your team. So in a trusting team, empathy allows us to feel safe within our failures because we're not just going to be blamed for them. It encourages leaders to understand the root cause behind poor performance. And by being empathetic, it allows leaders to help struggling employees improve and excel. There's that terrible term of performance management, and most people think that that means that they're going to be moved out of the business. I'm sure that the empathetic people that came up with it didn't mean that. They meant management of performance upwards so the person can rejoin the team in a productive way. The next slide, please, Anine. So why aren't we more empathetic at work? The main reason is because that demonstrating empathy takes time and effort. You need to show your awareness and understanding. You need to listen to understand rather than to reply. It's also not always easy to understand why someone thinks or feels the way they do about a situation. You don't have the same context as them. They might come from a different background from you. It also means putting others ahead of yourself, which can be a challenge in today's competitive workplace, especially in a corporate. Many organizations are focused on achieving their goals no matter what the cost to employees. And that's one of the biggest blockers for empathetic leadership and an empathetic way of working. And all of this, despite the fact that there are now decades of studies showing that businesses with empathetic leaders are more successful. Next slide, please, Anine. So how do we develop empathetic agile teams? At the 2014 Agile Alliance Conference on how empathy and compassion transform Scrum Masters' effectiveness, the Scrum coaches Michael Sahota and Olaf Lewitz covered four main elements of empathy. You need to see their world. You need to appreciate them as human beings. You need to understand their feelings and communicate understanding. So when Scrum Masters learn to communicate their understanding about others openly, Scrum teams will observe more openness about the challenges with performing the work and a shared mutual understanding among team members. Also in the Scrum Guides 2017 by Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwaber, they cite openness as an important Scrum value. So in a nutshell, openness creates harmony and happiness among team members. It builds a solid foundation of trust. It engenders win-win relationships, and it builds a positive team spirit that sticks through the twists and turns of a Scrum work process. Next slide, please, Anine. So how do you develop empathy or encourage empathy as a leader or a Scrum Master? The first way is to talk about empathy. You need to businesses need to let managers know that empathy matters, and managers need to let their people know that empathy matters. Many managers consider that monitoring and planning are more important to controlling the performance of their team members, but research shows that understanding, caring, and developing others is just as important, if not more, especially in today's workforce. If you explain that giving time and attention to others fosters empathy, which in turn enhances your performance, that improves your perceived effectiveness. Perceived effectiveness being quite an interesting term there. The second way is to teach listening skills. So to understand others and sense what they're feeling, you have to be a good listener. You need to let others know that they're being heard, and that they're being heard, and specifically when they express understanding of concerns and problems, and your understanding of concerns and their concerns and problems. When a manager is a good listener, people feel respected and trust can grow. And then trust is performance. Managers should focus on listening to hear. Again, pay attention not only to the words that are being said, but also the non-verbal cues. That's why video calls are quite good for one-on-ones and talking through problems, because you can catch the tone, the pace of speech, their facial expressions, their gestures, etc. The third way is to encourage genuine perspective taking, where you should actively try and put yourself in the other person's shoes. Fourth way is to cultivate compassion. It's to support those people who care about how someone else feels, or consider the effects that business decisions have on employees. And not only employees, maybe on customers and communities. Source ethically. You know, do you have suppliers that are horrible people? You know, and also go beyond the standard issue value statement. Allow time in your business, if possible, for compassionate reflection and response. You know, especially after a difficult management situation. Could it have been handled better? Was it empathetic? Did you make sure the person felt that their dignity was kept intact? And then support remote or global managers, and specifically diversity. The ability to be empathetic is especially important for leaders who work in distributed organizations like ours, or across cultural boundaries like anyone in South Africa. Working across cultures requires people to understand people who have very different perspectives and experiences. And empathy generates an interest in and an appreciation for others, paving the way to more productive working relationships. As managers and leaders hone their empathy skills, they improve their leadership effectiveness and they increase their chances of success in the job. Empathetic leaders are assets to organizations, in part because they are able to effectively build and maintain these relationships, and in part because their teams will perform better. And this is a critical part of leading organizations anywhere in the world. The next slide, please, Anine. So empathy, oh, sorry, the one before that. Thank you. Empathy, while sounding a little amorphous and kind of difficult to define, especially outside of sympathy, is actually innate in just about everyone. The working world doesn't always encourage an empathetic way of working or reward empathetic behavior in and of itself, but for individuals, teams, and businesses to perform at their best, empathy is definitely proving to be the critical difference. So listen to understand, be empathetic, encourage a sharing of diverse views, and see the positive effects. Great. Any questions? Last slide, please, Anine. Thank you. That was seamless. Thank you.
Almost. Awesome stuff. Is there anything you guys had questions around? I see there is a comment from Jeff saying some of the most difficult situations to be empathetic is personal relationships, particularly when you're fighting with someone that you have a close relationship with. Learning those skills benefit you in your personal and your work life. I think that is very, very true. Anything else, guys? Agreed.
If there aren't any questions, I'll tell you guys a story about the fact that Dan and I aren't sharing a stage for the first time.
Okay, we definitely want to know that.
Yeah, there's some hands up. Ali's got her hands up.
Okay, cool. We've got a hand.
Hi,
Ali?
guys. Hi, guys. Yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity. Pete, how would you address somebody who thinks they're being empathetic, but they're not because they don't understand what empathizing means?
Ali, without specific detail or knowing more about the person, I think that person may fall into the very small percentage of people who don't have empathy if they can't understand it. I don't want to cast aspersions on their character, but I think without further information, with them not able to understand empathy is a bit concerning.
Thanks, Pete.
Cool. Jeff?
Yeah. Jay?
Sorry, just unmuting. I think one of the things I've had some very difficult conversations with people people who you have quite a close relationship with. And we can often find ourselves, especially if you're in that situation where you're busy fighting with someone, that it is very difficult to either find yourself in an empathetic position or for the other person to find themselves being empathetic. If it's a case of somebody who is enraged, so they're angry or something, actually the best way to do it is you've got to help them calm down by basically being empathetic with them in the first place. But if it's somebody who simply refuses, I mean, the best I can think of is to help try and provide or prompt them to think about what it might be like to be in your position. But ultimately, I think, like Peter said, is if they aren't interested in hearing you out at all, which my experience has been that this is the exception. But usually prompting them to consider imagining your situation can help. But it also helps a lot to use the appropriate language. So we tend to jump to more accusative language, and that tends to aggravate the situation rather than help it. So my advice would be to steer away from any accusative language and rather talk about your personal experience without talking about the person specifically normally.
Yeah, and it requires a lot of preparation to do that. Look, you can't deal with someone while they're enraged. There's no, they have to calm down. I agree with you. One of the techniques that I was taught was the AID technique, the action, impact, and desired outcomes technique. But you have to be very careful about the language you use there again, because you need to talk to the person about the actions that you observed, the impact those actions had upon you, and then what you would prefer to have happened instead. And trying to avoid you in those three explanations is quite difficult. Vida, you also had a question.
Yes, I typed mine. Bill made a comment about rubber duck programming, and I was just wondering if you can talk a little bit more about that. What does he mean?
I assume he can talk. I've heard him talk before.
Okay, sorry. Multiple mute places. I think the term is actually rubber duck debugging. It's basically if somebody has a problem in their code, they come and talk to you about it, but you tell them to talk to the rubber duck and you just sit and listen. It allows them to go through the entire talking procedure. 9 times out of 10, they sort out the problem before you have to get involved. But I was just thinking it kind of relates to the listen, not to give them the solution, but just to let them talk. And 9 times out of 10, as I say, the person solves the problem themselves.
Ali does that with me all the time.
Yeah,
Hi.
it helps.
So isn't that, hi Andrew here, how you all doing? So I just want to add, I mean, to that, isn't that that art of listening, to be empathetic, is also sometimes you just need to repeat what the person said. So it's not stop listening to answer, but listen to actually understand. But listen to the person and actually repeat it back to them and let them either, as Bill says, solve it themselves, but understand that you've been a sounding board and push it out. We see that with our clients all the time. They want to be frustrated with us, they want to push it out, and often saying like, we hear you, but that's not really saying we can solve, it's for you to solve, but we understand your problem, repeat the problem, emphasize it in a different light, and let them either solve it, and then when you have to step in, you step in. So it's also, there are tools to actually deal with that, and actually, if you're not empathetic, to actually put some tooling and then some approaches forward that actually helps you be more empathetic.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think Rian also makes a very valid point here. It's really understanding and reiterating what that person says. It definitely makes a difference. Vida, your hand's still up. Did you have a question?
Oh no, I forgot to take down my hand. My arm is dead.
It's okay. Alrighty, guys. So last question before we move on. Awesome stuff. So thank you so much, Peter. That was very interesting. If you guys have more questions, you are most welcome to pop them in the chat, and we can always answer them afterwards and have a chat and take it all